Hello everybody, today we're going to be doing a lesson about photosynthesis in 12 minutes. Alright, so the first part that we're going to be covering in this photosynthesis lesson is we're going to cover about what you guys already know about photosynthesis first. Then we're going to move into some lectures and slides and learning about some of the basics of photosynthesis. And the last thing is we're going to take a quiz at the end, testing what it is that you have learned from this lesson. Okay, now the quiz is not going to be multiple choice, so I'm going to need you to take some quick notes as we are doing this. I'm going to let you know some of the things that I want to ask you about, and we're going to move on from there. All right, so photosynthesis, line of energy. First thing I want to do is I want to ask you a little bit of a brainstorm from photosynthesis. I want you to think of what are some associations you make when you hear the word photosynthesis. So this is for you guys to think about. Just go ahead and give me some words. I've heard energy, light, water, plants. Usually that's some of the more common ones. Mhm. We also think of sunlight. Definitely, that's part of light. We think of plant growth. Some of you might think of chloroplasts. Um, that's true. So now that you've given you a few seconds to think about it, I'm going to show you some of the words that I often hear when talking about photosynthesis. Here we go. Light, we have plants, we have water, energy, certainly, air. We have chloroplast. Some of you might know chloroplast from other classes when you learn about the cell and you know that chloroplast has to do with photosynthesis. We'll get into that in just a second. In particular, we have the sun here. Sugar, that's very important. Sugar is part of photosynthesis as well. And some of you might think of soil. Some of you might have brought up soil, and that's perfectly fine. These are some of the associations that we make. Uh, More generally, a lot of people think of we have water, we have soil, sunlight, and that forms energy in the form of sugar. That's very basic. We want to go a little bit deeper than that when we think about photosynthesis with this lesson. So first of all, we're going to go ahead and define photosynthesis here in the first actual let's call it lecture slide. Okay, so what is photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is the process used by plants, algae, and some bacteria to harness energy from sunlight and turn it into a chemical energy. Now, you might remember chemical energy uh, from previous lessons that you might have learned about. That's like energy like that's kind of stored. The way energy can be stored in a battery. The plants also store it, but obviously they're not batteries, so they store it in chemical bonds. Um, that they can use later for storage, of course. Obviously, the sun gives it sunlight. And what do you think, when you think of photosynthesis in particular, what type of light do you think the plant absorbs? So, a lot of people believe that plants absorb green light, and that's why you see them green. In fact, it absorbs colors that are other than green. The only one it doesn't absorb is green, and that green light is deflected, and that's what we see. And that's why we see plants as green. Other parts of the plants and pretty much everything that we see is actually bouncing back the light that we see, not the ones that it's absorbing. Okay, so plants are green because it is reflecting green light. And you can see here we have a very basic very basic idea for the synthesis. We have light coming in, as I already mentioned. We have carbon dioxide, which is found in the air that you breathe. So all of the air that you breathe is not all oxygen. A large part of it is actually carbon dioxide. Um, and then you also have carbohydrates being formed. You have water being a part of it. So the plant needs water in order for it to form the carbohydrates, which are also known as sugars. Um, and one important thing is that plants will give off oxygen as waste. Obviously, oxygen is not wasteful, but it's not being used by the plant, and it exits as what we call waste. Okay. So where exactly in the plant is this taking place? We're going to look at the chloroplast here. So the chloroplast is an organelle of plant cells that contains stacks of what are called thylakoids, and those are these coin-looking parts inside of the chloroplast here. Chloroplast is where all of photosynthesis takes place, and pretty much the plant's leaves all are covered with a lot of chloroplast in them, and of course, within those are more thylakoids. Inside the members of the thylakoids, we also have chlorophyll, which absorbs the energy from the sunlight. The chlorophyll is the filament, the little, even tinier piece of the plant that's doing all of the photosynthesis, absorbing the sunlight to turn it into sugar. Okay, so that's where photosynthesis is taking place in the chloroplast, in the thylakoid structures inside the chloroplast in particular, and the chlorophyll is a little molecule doing the absorption of sunlight. Okay, now we must make a distinction before we continue here, because photosynthesis is cut into two different sets of reactions. We have what are called the light-dependent reactions, and we have the Calvin cycle, which can also be known as the light-independent reactions. So what's going to happen with each one? Well, in the light-dependent reactions, as the name suggests, that's where sunlight has to be there in order for the reaction to take place. So light-dependent reactions are not taking place at night when the plant is not receiving any sunlight. So what are the molecules involved here? Well, we have water. You can see here H2O. We have light, and they produce NADPH and ATP, two molecules that are going to move on to the other set of reactions. And what they do in particular is they're going to save energy and transfer hydrogen molecules that are needed for the set of reactions in the Calvin cycle. Another thing is that we have in this set of reactions, we also have as waste oxygen. So oxygen is exiting the plant, and that oxygen used to be part of the water that was coming in. So we were taking the hydrogen in, the oxygen was being taken out, sunlight was coming in, and the plant was taking the energy through that. From there, we have the Calvin cycle, and in the Calvin cycle, we have carbon dioxide from the air. So carbon dioxide enters for the Calvin cycle reactions. It is not reacting in the light-dependent reactions. And then the NADPH and the ATP are both also reacting with the carbon dioxide to form glucose, to form those sugars that the plant uses to store its energy. So we need to make sure that we get that distinction correct. Light-dependent reactions require light. The Calvin cycle also does not need light to happen, but that is where the carbon dioxide comes in. We're going to break it down a little bit further as we move on. We're going to make a little bit more association, okay? So, results from the light-dependent reactions. Here in particular, we have water as one of the reactants. We have sunlight as the second reactant. And then we have the products, which are two molecules, NADPH and ATP. Okay, those are very important for you to remember, and those are going to be the ones that move on to the other set of reactions. And we also have oxygen coming out as waste. That's an important note to make because that's how it affects us, right? Plants are taking carbon dioxide from the water, and they're giving off oxygen, which we use to breathe. And when we learn about respiration, we're going to see how we use oxygen for ourselves. Okay. Next, we have the results from the Calvin cycle. So carbon dioxide, which is in the air, which you've already talked about. And then the molecules of NADPH and ATP from the light reactions are the reactants in this case, okay? And out comes glucose or sugar, which is also the way that the plants will chemically store the energy that they're going to be using later, okay? Listen, remember those two independently, try to remember them separately. Carbon dioxide with the Calvin cycle, you can always associate the C's, right? Calvin. And then glucose is the product in this case, okay? Remember that's the product in this situation. So here are the two reactions and how they interact with each other, okay? You can see again, water, sunlight, oxygen as waste, NADPH, which moves over to the Calvin cycle, reacts with carbon dioxide and form sugar, okay? All right, so let's move on to the last part here. We have our photosynthesis quiz. It's going to be very short. I know this lesson was very short, but we're going to go ahead and take a few minutes just to look at some questions. They're going to be short answer, not multiple choice, all right? First, question number 1. The set of reactions that take in light and water are called the blank. Go ahead and write your answer. Okay, the set of reactions that take in light and water are called the what? It should be pretty simple. Okay, question 2, the product of the Calvin cycle is blank. What is the product of the Calvin cycle? AKA the light independent reactions. They do not need light. Okay, and the third question, in which organelle does photosynthesis take place? What is the little organelle in which photosynthesis takes place? Okay, please submit your questions, your answers rather, and we're gonna go back and take a look at the answers, all right? So, question 1. The set of reactions that take in light and water are obviously called the light-dependent reactions, right? We need the light for the light reactions to happen. Uh, and as a bonus question, what are the products of the light-dependent reactions? Okay. Now I hope you are able to answer NADPH and ATP because those sound like some very good exam questions that I can ask later on. Always remember NADPH and ATP are going to be reactants in the next set of reactions, okay, which are called the Calvin cycle. It also takes in carbon dioxide along with the NADPH and ATP. And what is the product? We already should have answered this. Let me hear from you. That's right. The product of the Calvin cycle is sugar or glucose. We can call it either one. Glucose is sugar. Therefore, if you answer that, you will get full credit. Always remember that we want to call it glucose. But if you answer sugar, then I know what you're talking about. I know that you understand what the Calvin cycle is doing. So, good on you for that. Right? And third question, in which organelle does photosynthesis take place? You guys should already know that we're talking about the chloroplast here. In particular, what are the structures inside the chloroplast? That's not what I asked you, but that might be what I want to ask you in an exam. We're thinking of thylakoids, okay? And we have the molecule chlorophyll, which takes in the sunlight and stores it so that it can be used in the set of reactions, okay? Now in the future, when we go ahead and look at photosynthesis more in depth, we're gonna go ahead and break down the light reactions into smaller sets of reactions, more detailed. Same thing for the Calvin cycle, and we're gonna see how mathematically they match up so that you can get enough sugar and replenish the cycle. So really, what is the reason that the Calvin cycle is a cycle? That's gonna be next, okay? For now, we just wanna learn these basics. We wanna learn light reactions, Calvin cycle reactions, reactants, products, where does it take place, and all of this very basic stuff, okay? Thank you so much for paying attention with me, for staying with these quiz questions, and for listening to my lecture. I'll see you next time.